getting back to the layout for Zipline networks in Stranding. This took a little bit longer than I expected for this video to come out because it took longer to build the network than I thought, and life gets in the way and the holidays and all sorts of things. So I imagine by now anyone who started on day one is finished with the game, either gotten the platinum trophy or finished to their own particular level of completion, whatever they feel like. But I figured this would be something useful for posterity, for people in the future, because this game is all about leaving a legacy for those that come after us. So after you build Ziplines, I've found something you want to get into the habit of is just giving it a quick scan and looking for other green Zipline icons. I know the blue and the green can be kind of similar to the eye, but online Zipline in the tag there is a dead giveaway as opposed to just Zipline. You want to find the online ones. Anyone from any structures that you didn't place yourself, and just get used to holding down triangle and clearing them from your map, kind of like weeding. On principle, it annoys me that this is the way to go. Oh, we got one down. Look at that. Well, talk about that when we get to it. On principle, it kind of annoys me that tearing down what other people have built is kind of antithetical to the idea of the game. But in this case, having connection points that weren't part of the plan makes it more difficult to navigate, and they're going to keep popping back up, but it's all you can do really to try to keep things simple, because you're going to be traveling these networks a lot. As you can see at the top there on the bandwidth, 41,220 is your max bandwidth for the central region, which means you can get 81 Ziplines total. That's part of the reason it took so long, is because in order to fill out the map with all of the bandwidth I had available, it required me more or less to complete the bulk of the endgame. I had to max out all of the friendship stars for all of the different locations and get the best beloved trophy in the process. I still have to go around and get all of the memory chips, as well as a handful of little things, so I don't have the platinum quite yet, but I wanted to make sure to get this video out first. So, we are going to be starting, just to give you a brief overview at the top, we're going to be starting at Lake Knot, up here. And what I found, what ended up working for me as I was building out my network, was figure 8 patterns. So we're going to be starting from Lake Knot, going down the side here to the Chiral Artist, and then there is a connection point up here by the Elder, which gets us down through the distribution center and then south to South Knot. That has a leg that goes down to the Timefall farm, and then we carry up, here we are, we carry up to the weather station and back, up to the Craftsman and over to Peter Englert, which, if you watched my video on the Higgs journals, we have already spent a little bit of time around there. And then this connects back over to Lake Knot. Now, that leaves us with, that means there's a northern connection, there's a central connection, and note we are not touching the Rockies yet, because that gets into a whole different can of worms. But again, it's going to be the same principle over here later of as much of a figure 8 pattern as we can manage. But Yeah, so over here in Flyover country, we've got a northern connection, we've got a central connection through the Elder, and there was at one point I had a southern connection going from South Knot over to a ridge and then to a coast and then back to the chiral artist, but I ended up having to clear out those two nodes, the Ziplines there, because I needed them over in the mountains because they are way more important over here than over here. On this side of the mountains you can theoretically walk if you have to, and it's a reasonable thing to do. So that's the basic layout of how this network works. It is not the most efficient. There are some parts that are downright ugly, but it's the best thing I've been able to figure out. So please feel free in the comments to recommend any suggestions or alterations you can think of for the benefit of future generations of players. So leaving from Lake Knot, so far it's starts off simple, building straight out from, oh no, there's a porter, who's going to get attacked by this? Building straight out from Lake Knot to the engineer. A couple of things I've learned is that as you're zipping along, you're going to want to get into the habit of pointing the camera toward where you're ultimately going. Because see that one there? That's not one of mine. I think I missed it, but we're just going to keep the camera trained on that zip line over in the distance there, just to demonstrate. Works if it's a viable zip line. The guide will snap into place. So for instance, I've got one over from this next part we're going to get to. Here's the engineer, by the way. From this next part we're going to get to, I have one off on a foothill to the left, and I have one up on the mountain to the right. So we're going to just keep the camera trained up to the right, even though that's not quite where we're going to show off how. So the guide will snap into place toward whichever zip line the camera happens to be facing towards. So if you're doing a long trip with a lot of different connections, it makes it real easy to be able to just keep the camera pointed where you're heading and see how it goes straight up to the mountains. Now you can just press X and be on your way without having to spin around and navigate. But we are not heading that way. So the first three up here, pretty simple layouts. It's a straight line from Lake Knot to the engineer with one in the middle to span the distance. 350-foot intervals, like before. You're going to want to keep upgrading at least to level 2 as we go along. And this foothill here is one of the first points you're going to want to try to make sure to hit. And for things like this, what I tend to do is, from the engineer, that point off that we just came from, I will create that spot, create a spot 700 feet or so away on the foothill, maybe a little less than 700, just to give yourself some wiggle room, and then from there, and with both of those upgraded, I will then find the middle sweet spot here to make sure everything's connected up nice. So from the engineer, we're going to be going over down to the film director and off to the junk dealer. And in my building out, this was the first major hurdle. I believe we're coming up on, so off to the left there, you can see that is someone else's zipline. That's not part of my network. If you end up accidentally going off onto someone else's structure, it takes you off track and can slow you down. It's not, usually it's not, a game changer. It's just kind of annoying. But you can also kind of tell, you see that the colors are different between, his green on the left and my blue on the right, but also, to my eye, it looks like the green ones are a little brighter and the outlines are a little bolder, so just to distinguish. I also try to keep mine at as close to 350-foot increments as I can possibly get, so a lot of the time that will help. And this is actually the first time I'm playing since the new update, and the increased text size helps quite a bit there. So from this foothill, we're heading down into these weird plains. I'm not sure. I honestly forget if there was an explanation in the game or not for why all the soil out here is so red. I know this is part of where the bombs went off when... yeah, spoilers. This is all endgame stuff, so I imagine if you're here, then we are well past spoiler territory. Yeah, this I think is where Fragile started, actually got tricked into carrying the bomb, or one of the bombs. So here's where we started to have an issue. You see off on the right there, now centering the screen at 213 meters away, that's one of mine. That is the one that was on the map that was down. We'll go take care of that in a second. But there's no real clean way to hit the film director off on the left here. And so you've got to... I ended up having to get comfortable with triangles. And the way those work is if you can't really hit at a clean increment the spot you're trying to for, destinations and preppers and things, what you're going to end up wanting to do is building the network along past them to go for, continue down the line to wherever your next destination is. But then I would hit a point in front of the prepper or the distribution center or wherever you're trying to go that connects to the two closest on the line, so that way you have the option of tangenting off or of continuing, whichever way you want to go. And I'll demonstrate that more in a second. Repairs are a thing you kind of have to get used to. Hoard your chiral crystals. I would draw them out from centers and preppers as often as possible just to maintain a supply, because ziplines will go down, and happens especially in the mountain regions. The rust color is a godsend for that sort of thing. So as you're zipping around, you can see how corroded they are. And if it looks, you can go by the physical appearance pretty often. If it looks bad, you can take a second to hop off while you're going and do some repairs on the way. So this is the sort of thing I was talking about. From here, I've got the option of going left to the film director or to the right and continuing down the line. But then from the film director, amongst all these crags, like there's his hovel, I can equally, go off to the north, the right from here, back up toward Lake Knot, or head south down toward the junk dealer. It's not ideal. Ideally, you'd be able to hit this spot at a clean 350 point and be as efficient as possible. But there's a handful of places along the line here where that's just not the way it falls out. Unfortunately, like I said, if anybody has a more efficient layout or any suggestions, please feel free to leave a comment or hit me up through a message or something. Not likely to change it at this point, but it'll be good to know just for compiling information for the future. Moving on down this way, we are going to have a spot. Now this is going to look a little far off, and it is. But this is actually your point for the junk dealer. There is a path leading up that way, and you're going to have to do a little bit of footwork on this one. You see this spot's already corroded. So this is a good candidate to hop off and do some repairs. And these will eat through your crystals very quickly. See, I'm already out. I'll have to pick some more up next time I do a delivery. I have a few more deliveries I need to do. I still got to get all of my... I got to get my delivery time stat up to 60 still. But you're going to want to bank on this side, this eastern side of the junk dealer's compound here, because it helps get the distance to connect over toward the artist, and the amount of walking here is not too bad. It's fairly flat. There's a couple of places where you're going to have to like judge that, way up between, more efficiency in the overall network and having to do a little bit of walking. I tend to err on if I have to walk a little bit for a prepper. It's not the end of the world. There's one in particular that'll be coming up fairly soon that's more egregious than most, but it's an isolated incident. It's one guy, and it's not something that happens ever again, so it's just a thing you kind of have to deal with. Up on this ridge here, vantage points again. You're always looking for the high ground and for line of sight on as much of the terrain below as possible. Now this could have been further out, this one I'm heading toward now, but I brought it down the hill a little bit. Originally it was up there, up the hill a bit toward the chiral artist's compound. I brought it down for the southern connection that went across the lake to make that all hit clean, but then I had to take those two out. And so it can go a bit more north of this, like toward their property line, as close as you want. Now, backtracking a little bit, that is your basic line down from Lake Knot, hitting the engineer, the film director, the junk dealer, and the chiral artist. But we're going to head back north. All the way back up to Lake Knot. And from there, we're going to head through the northern connection. I'm also doing this, I'm showing this off not necessarily in the order I built it. Plotting all of these out for me turned into one of those multi-headed problems where I would get stuck in one direction. For instance, once I started building south from Lake Knot and got here around the film director, I got hung up on how to make this part work, and this was before I started embracing using these triangle junctions, because I was still trying to keep it as efficient as possible, use as few ziplines as was necessary, but I ended up having to compromise that a little bit. So from there, I ended up going, starting down south at the chiral artist and meeting in the middle, and that's how I worked all that out. So this one here in the middle of the field, keep that one in mind, because this is our central connection. In fact, it's going to go up there. We're going to be up there in just a moment. So remember, this this spot here just south of the engineer. Some of these are gonna be difficult to get initially due to mules and terrorists. So a couple of these points you're going to have to drop right in the middle of hostile territory like that. If you can get in and plant the zipline without being seen, all the better. I have not had the best luck with those counter pings. So up there is Lake Knot, where we started. So from here, we are going to head west. Right under the highway. This is another one of those spots where I had my left and my right zip lines in place before I set the one in the middle. And occasionally you will have to tweak those, and it's a trial and error process. Hopefully the point of making these videos makes the trial and error a lot less so for those who come after. So here's your connection. This is going to take us over to Peter Englert, who, again, spoilers, endgame stuff. If you're watching this, you should already know. This is Higgs's hideout. Talked about this in the journal episode, but that over there is as close as you're going to get, and in a reasonable fashion, because Higgs has a number of issues with all of his pizza delivery missions, and you're not even going to be able to build out here until you're finished with that entire quest line. So once you're done, there's really no point in having to keep something right on its doorstep. So this is just a hill that I found that overlooks everything pretty reasonably, and it's close enough that if I ever want to go check out his weird little room again, then it's, you know, a reasonable little walk to do that. So down here, again, foothills are going to be your friend a lot of the time. Small elevations without, you know, having to climb all the way up. And if you aren't building in that direction, then there's no need to. Couple of little hops south. Will get you to the Craftsman. Now, much like the on the southern end of things, how I would have liked to have had a connection across Crater Lake, this is another place. Would have been nice to have a connection over this way, north, go to the map view, maybe up to the ruined shelter and then over to the way station, but I just ended up not having the bandwidth. That was part of the plan initially. Maybe 1, 2, maybe 3 more would have gotten me, but I could possibly move this one over and reconfigure that one, but then I still wouldn't have enough to finish that connection off. But again, you know, as efficient as I could have gotten it, and it's not even close to the ugliest thing. We're going to get to some stuff down here in a second that I am not proud of, but is what it is. The only way I could make it work. So, from here, we are going south. Another little relay spot right in the middle of the field. I think I've got this one up on top of a small rock structure, if I remember correctly. Yeah, these sorts of things are usually going to be your friend. Just to give you, you'd be surprised how often just that little bit of height can make the difference when trying to make a connection. And now up here is going to be the Elder. And if you recall that one spot south of the Engineer I mentioned earlier, to keep in mind, that is where this connection meets up. So from here, got the Elder off to the north. There he is down there. And we meet up right down here. And this is not the biggest example. That's that spot south of the Engineer, like I was saying before. And this is not the biggest example, but this is something else to keep in mind when you're going through mountainous areas, and we're going to touch base a lot on this when we get over to the Rockies, is that going through passes down the slopes is pretty much the name of the game there. That's the best way to make any of that work out. But we'll get more on that later. So from here we're doing a couple of outside spots on cliff tops. One there, and then a second one up here. This is a fairly distinguishable peak. Should make it easy to identify. And that gives you a shot down on the distribution center. So that's our big northern loop. Take a look at the map in a second here. So you'll notice we've gone a loop around up here, getting all of the major points along the way, and then we've done a pass down the eastern side. So from here, we're going to have to work our way down to South Knot, and then a couple of branches to the weather station and the Timefall farm. Which, as far as this video is concerned, we are going to end once we get to South Knot and break this up, because the Rockies is going to be a whole nother beast. And here, where we got, that's heading back up toward the north. This is where a lot of the ugliness comes into play, a lot of the things that I wish could have been cleaner. From the distribution center, we are going to head south toward the collector. I'm going to do a ping really quick. And yeah, you're always going to get a load spike, or I'm always going to get a load spike, because this is the collector. I could not find a way to get a zip line down on that ledge in front of his house. So what I ended up doing was I built one up here, and I just threw a ton of climbing anchors down into the pit. Partly, I mean, you know, primarily for an easy way down, but the reason I got a level 2 climbing anchor and just threw them all there is because all of those purple lines are real easy tell that, right, this is it. This is where the collector is. We're not in just some random part of the fields here. So that's kind of ugly. And this is even worse over here. I couldn't really find a good way to connect up this with all the stuff I had done to the south, because this was another point where I had been working from multiple directions at once. And on the south end of it, seemed pretty, seemed like a no-brainer to start from there, since you've got a handful of zip lines that Mama builds for you and are already placed. So it seemed to make sense to build off of those. But I couldn't really find a good way to connect everything up So what I ended up doing was another one of those triangles, but bigger this time. So a couple points off of the collector here. And we end up out onto these bearings, where you'll notice there's one going off in that direction. The collector we have off in that direction. That's someone else's. And then going off to the west toward the mountains. And that is not great, but it's the best I could do. So we're going to hit the mountains first, because that's a short leg. This is going to take us up toward the weather station. This path continues, because this is our central connection into the Rockies, but we are not going to show that off just yet. So we got one down at the bottom there, one up the hillside, and then finally one over in front of the weather station. For future reference, it does continue up that way, but that will be another video for another time. Do try, though, to avoid that Epcot Center looking ball. Just make sure to not hose yourself with the placement, so that doesn't get in the way of what you're connecting to next, because I did that the first time. Back down. Some of the architecture in the preppers and the shelters can get in the way. It's irritating when it happens, but there's not a whole lot to be done. Timefall Farm, which is where we're heading next, has a big example of that I'll show you once we get there. Alright. So one more and we're back to the point where we branched off. So the collector is off to the left there, and we are going to be heading toward the south. So from here, oh my bad, I skipped one. So that's where we branched off there. And we've got this connection here. It's another one of those triangles. Do one quick little side jaunt, just backtrack a little bit. Again, this part's not. That's someone else's. So we're going to ignore that. So this is where we branched off from. That's off to the collector. That's off to the weather station. And you'll note that that one off in the distance there also connects to that one. And that gives you just a smoother, it gives you a more complicated network, more to remember in the moment, but it can give you a smoother travel path as you're going. Part of the reason that this had to be the way it was is because this zipline we're currently on had to be exactly where it is, and a couple of other things had to be exactly where they were, and that was built around the collector and the cosplayer having very difficult to get to locations. The cosplayer, as far as I can tell, it has to be basically right here. If you go up a step, you're going to be stumbling on your way down, which is not something you really want to do with a loaded backpack. And so that sort of dictated a few things. So that, to my eye, is the ugliest section of ziplining I've done in the game. There's a couple of other points that are less than ideal, but that is by far the worst of it. So now we're getting up towards Mama's lab, and these are the ones that are in place from the start of the game. This one and these two down here, right? Those are just the way they are. I would recommend building out the one I'm on and the one I'm connected to right now. I would recommend leveling those two up to level 2. In fact, if you want this connection that you're seeing right now to work, you have to. And that is actually where I got this setup here, is where I got the idea to start using those triangle connections, because the game gives you one. Head over there in a second, but first we want to head down. This is a very narrow shot that the game lets you do. Right onto this bank. Across the river, the waterfall is off to the right there. It's a little hard to see with this this fog, but from here we're going to be connecting to another foothill. And this is right in the middle of terrorist territory, so there's their camp, as a matter of fact. From this foothill, we're shooting off toward the Timefall farm. You see those silos off on the right side of your screen? Those are the architecture I mentioned earlier that can get in the way, because we are going to be heading off from here, and like the weather station, this connects on further, but we'll deal with that another time. But you do want to make sure to place so that you can get around those silos, because up that way is the veteran porter and your southern connection to the Rockies. Now, Timefall Farm, you're also going to want to make sure you drop in front of one of the roads that lead in through the wheat fields. There's not a whole lot you can do, because as you can see, the property line is right there. So this is as close as you can get. Final leg coming up, going back to Mama's lab, and then just south to South Knot City, and that'll cover everything east of the Rockies. The Rocky Mountains themselves they feel smaller, and everything feels a lot more compact once you get the zip lines up. But as you're aware, and I've grown to know more intimately that I'd like, trying to walk anywhere in snow in this game just takes forever. And that's one of the reasons I don't feel bad about using the mechanic that breaks the game. It's sort of it's my mind, it's kind of like the hyper beam at the end of Metroid Prime or something, one of those items that, lets you realize just how far you've come. So these are the 3 that you start off with, just, from Mama's lab coming out. And it makes a natural point to build off of. Because you've got them, you might as well use them, especially when bandwidth is so limited. And then it's just a simple 1-2 connection down to South Knot City. And here we are. And what would have connected across the lake, but unfortunately. So that takes care of everything on this side of the mountains. Gonna come back later with another video closing this out, doing the mountain region. As I said the last video, not really going to bother with the Pacific because you only get enough bandwidth for like 2 ziplines, and there's nothing really to connect. Like once you walk from one of the points to the other during the endgame chapters, there's no real reason to ever go back there. You don't do any deliveries out there. It's just it's for the plot, and Edge Knot City is a major plot location, but you don't really need ziplines out there, so there's not a whole lot to do. So that's going to take care of that for now. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe and all of those things. This is going to be archived on my YouTube channel at either Raqus or Raqus 40. I think it's just Raqus on YouTube. Raqus. And thanks for watching. Have a good day.